any of the agenda items. Do we have any public comments tonight? Seeing none, we'll move into our first action item, which is the wetland conditional use permit application for buffer impacts resulting from the construction of a private drive and associated utilities, drainage, treatment structures to serve 11 proposed townhouse condominium dwelling units at 32 Charter Street. We have a team here to present on that. I will turn it over to the team here to introduce this project.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. Christian Smith with Beals Associates, representing the applicant on the project. This a good place for the boards? They're going to be able to get that with the cameras, I presume?
I think so.
That's, yep.
We'll find out. Does that work?
That's fine. We just ask that when you speak at the mic.
Oh, you need a mic.
With you.
Right.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
So I'll just quickly go through the plans. Along with me in the audience tonight is Jim Gove of Gove Environmental Services and Frank Catapano, the developer on the project. Oh, she brought the mic to me. Thank you. So this is the property. I know we've been before you in the Zoom format on this, and essentially the site, as you well know, but for members of the public that are not aware, is quite a mess at this point. There are buildings and docks and all sorts of debris within the prime wetland itself, and a bunch of other things, outbuildings, gravel areas, paved areas within the 100 and 125 foot setbacks of the prime buffer. And what the proponent is proposing is, and this is another point that we should probably make before we get into that. This is an overlay of the actual field delineated wetlands versus the GIS wetlands. So that is something, I'll let Jim speak to that when I'm through here, but we are going through the Chapter 700 criteria with DES to have the prime boundary modified to actual field conditions as opposed to the GIS mapping. But this particular plan Kristen had me put together simply shows you what that overlay is. Again, the green is what's on the Exeter and the state GIS mapping, and the actual field delineation gets pretty close up through here, but then departs, for by about 100 feet, 70 feet in that location. And my colors didn't print very well on this, but this kind of shows the encroachment, the 3,000 square feet of 3,000 plus square feet of prime wetland that we're going to, or we are proposing to, remove all the debris, the trash, the deer bones, everything out of that area, restore that. And then the blue, which again did not come up well, looks better on the PDFs, but the blue is what we are proposing to restore completely the 50-foot buffer, a 50-foot buffer to the prime wetland. And finally, the proposal would be for 11 townhouse units, one 4-unit building, one 7-unit building, parking, utilities, and drive aisle, stormwater collection and treatment system. And, so this results in just over 18,000 square feet of temporary impact to the buffers, and results in 15,000 and some short change square feet, which you can all see in the CUP application that we put together. And that 15,000 square feet just includes the buildings, it includes the paved areas, and then some disturbance for the stormwater structures. So by and large, that's our proposal. What we're hoping to walk away with tonight would be your favorable opinion on what we're proposing to do with regard to the restoration, and obviously to opine for the planning board, as they're the ones that will ultimately make the formal vote on the conditional use permit for the project. You can see the roofs. We're proposing to take all of the roof area into 4-foot wide stone drip edges, and everything else that hits the pavement from about this point will be collected in a sediment forebay and then a wet pond downstream for BMP treatment. And largely that's the proposal, and I can turn it over to Jim if you want to chat briefly about the changing of the line.
Yes. Hi, for the record, my name is Jim Gove. I'm with Gove Environmental Services. We have talked in the past about this concept that when you have a prime wetland that has been interpreted by aerial photo, and then you essentially try to take that aerial photo interpretation and put it on the ground, or in this case on a plan, it doesn't match up. And it doesn't match up because of a variety of things, including the fact that you have distortion from the aerial photos. You have just the fact that you're taking something that's an aerial photo and trying to put it onto a two-dimensional drawing. So all those elements end up basically distorting the edge of the prime wetland boundary. The DES has a mechanism by which we can modify that prime wetland boundary so it matches the actual wetland boundary. And that mechanism is found in ENV WT 70305, which is challenges to the prime wetland boundary. Now, that sounds very dramatic to tell you that we're challenging the prime wetland boundary. Actually, what we want to do is try to just match the two wetland boundaries together. So we actually have the prime wetland boundary and the actual flagged wetland boundary end up being at the same place, which is actually what was the intent of the law change back in 2012 under 482A, where it actually said it shall become the same boundary. But this is the mechanism that we have to go through. And we actually have to put this into the application. In other words, it's not a separate application. It is part of the application that we're bringing before you. So that, and essentially what it says is that if you concur, or if you want to concur, then you essentially have to, as part of the application, also concur with that boundary adjustment. It does say you have 90 days. My hope would be that you don't need 90 days to do this, that you could do this in a standard time frame. There are a couple of elements which I guess need to be worked out with staff a little bit, because if this boundary change is accepted, then we actually do need to have some map changes, actual town map changes, which I assume, Kristen, that we can work with you to make those corrections accurate. A couple other minor things I just wanted to bring up. We were on a Zoom call. Kristen was kind enough to actually be on the Zoom call, or I guess they use WebEx, with the Department of Environmental Services as we were talking about this issue. And there was a request by Natural Heritage Inventory to do an analysis to see whether or not we had the stout dotted smartweed on the site and whether or not it would be impacted by the removal of the trash, debris, et cetera. So we did a plant survey out there, and we've completed it. It's been sent in, and we did get a response back from Natural Heritage that said, essentially, thank you. That's great that you're not going to be having any impact to that particular endangered plant. With regard to the actual removal, we're essentially going to be trying to do this in a least invasive manner possible. We're basically just going to try to drag the trash out from there. We aren't proposing going in there with, excavators and tearing up the ground or anything like that. We're essentially trying to keep it as the least impacting alternative we can as far as removing the vegetation, removing the actual debris from there. There will be some removal outside of the wetland boundary of some of the gravel and pavement that's in that 50-foot as part of a restoration. But I don't foresee any reason that we need to actually bring in significant excavation into the prime wetland itself. But any areas where we do have any exposed soils, we want to reseed so that we don't end up with any kind of, invasive species coming in. I think that's about it. I'll be glad to answer your question, and Christian is here to answer any questions as well.
So we have the CUP application here. You also need DES wetlands.
Right, we need to come back before you to do the actual dredge and fill presentation and then your concurrence, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
But you're gonna get this prime wetland boundary, the hope is to get that result first.
Well, okay, so in talking, so here's the wording. And Kristen, feel free to jump in here, because you were on this. What it says is it has to be done by the applicant. So therefore, we just can't go to DES and say, gee, we want to do this. We have to actually file an application. And so, and I think the direction they gave us was we have to file this as all part of the same application. So it's going to be an application that includes, we're covering two issues with the same application. The first issue is that we are working in the prime wetland. Okay, that removal of trash is considered to be work in the prime wetland. Admittedly, it's temporary work, but it's still work within the prime wetland. So therefore, that makes it a work in a priority resource area, which means that we have to do a standard application. In fact, it's going to be called a major standard application. And then in that application, we also need to address the fact that the prime wetland boundary is not contiguous with the flagged wetland boundary. So that has to be in that application. And so that is the application will come before you when we get it put together.
And so all this, what we're seeing, just to be clear, is the field surveyed wetland boundary that Gove Environmental
Correct.
delineate
Correct.
did out on the field. So
Right.
if we were to default to the other boundary, it would actually, since it's closer, there would be more buffer impacts. So there's less buffer impacts, given that we're using the field delineation.
Yeah, that's actually correct. The field delineation is fairly accurate on a portion of the site, but the field delineation differs
that
from, on a portion of the site. And in truth, I mean, to be totally honest about it, I don't think it would impact the project one way or the other. I think the numbers would look better, quote numbers, for the amount of buffer impact. But I don't think it actually, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it would actually impact any of the actual design.
No, that's correct, Jim. The design would remain the same. There would just simply be in the southerly portion of where the GIS mapping shows it. As you alluded to, Mr. Chairman, there would be slightly higher numbers within those buffers because the buffers would be slightly pushed back into the buildings and the proposed development.
What is that little area? Is there stuff in that area? Has it been, do you know, in that area where there's a difference? What is that consist
I
of?
do not believe there is debris in that location, but is there? Let me check. Oh, I stand corrected. So here is the area where they kind of come together at about this point, roughly, the middle of the width of the lot. That's where the field delineated line and the GIS line kind of overlap or coincide with one another. Where the difference is, Mr. Chairman, is right up in here, and I am mistaken because that's quite a big pile that even falls into the field delineated wetland line, and there's more debris in what would be the GIS line as it sits right now.
Is it, I mean, it seems certainly possible that GIS line was formed using an older aerial image that may have predated
When were those
this debris. And that the act of this former land user could have, in fact, impacted the wetland itself.
I think it's, to be totally honest, I think it's very possible. And the issue that I see in that area where there's a separation, it clearly it's fill. Okay, there's no question it's fill. It's upland, but it's fill. And we have done some pits in and around that area, and you have essentially this much fill, and then you go into organic material underneath, which was wetland certainly at one time. So it's not unreasonable to think that that at some point in the past was probably closer to the prime wetland boundary than what I have flagged out today.
Okay. Do other people have, do we need to, I guess we need to, do we need to address the boundary issue before we talk about I guess as a conservation commission, well, why don't I take a step back? Are there public members here? That would like to comment on this? No. Okay. Are there anyone online that would like to comment? Any public comment on this plan? We don't seem to have any public comment here for this.
So, yeah, I would recommend that you address whether or not you're all supportive of amending the prime wetland boundary, because if you're not, then that will change the buffer impact calculation.
Let me just be clear, in my mind, I'm a little slow on the uptake here. The green is the original, and that line, the field line, is the one that juts in there and comes out. Now, doesn't that make it, wouldn't that push the buffers in more and get them out of the buffers more?
Yes.
Yeah.
So adjusting it, there will be less buffer
Okay,
impacts.
And the calculations, to confirm, are based on the GIS buffer or the field buffer?
The calculations in the CUP are based on the actual field delineated boundary.
Okay.
Oh, they
Yeah.
are? Oh.
Yes.
I mean, so this is a relatively small area.
What is the difference in area between field and GIS total?
I haven't done that calculation, but looking at it, we're probably talking about maybe 2,000 square feet, something along those lines.
There are a few places on the northern part where it's actually slightly closer, by maybe a few feet, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this project. I know maybe not everyone, we have some newer folks who weren't here for the site visit, the original site visit, but this is our third time talking about this project. I mean, from the beginning, we've talked about, there's been an acknowledgement of a trade-off here that we're making with this development, that the developer has a heavy load to lift, literally, to clean up the site. And there was always an acknowledgement that this wasn't going to be a zero impact to the buffers project because of that. There was going to be some allowances made because of all the improvements to the buffer in the end that will happen. I don't know if you haven't talked about that, but there's a fair amount of stuff and impervious surface and runoff right now that goes towards into the buffer and or the wetland itself. So I guess that's just to remind everyone that we've had some conversations about this in the past, and there was an acknowledgement from the commission. Not that we're beholden to that. That was also made very clear that what we said before doesn't limit us in our decision tonight. But that there was going to be some amount of impact to the buffers expected in this project. And so I don't know if anyone has comments about the delineation, maybe we get through that first. Does anyone feel strongly either way?
I'm just curious, of the photos that are in the packet, is number 7 into that area, or number 5? Or are they different? The 7, I remember the site walk, in that area actually seemed more disturbed than 7.
The vegetation grew too, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Bill, hi. So if you,
I'm just curious.
yeah, no, if you take number 6, and then you flip over to number 7, it's almost like you're looking first at a portion of that, I call it the bump out, all right? And then you go to 7, so that'd be like you're just kind of moving your eyes over to the left, and the wooded area on the left is actually the embankment of the railroad track. So if you look at it from that perspective, you can see that you go to 6 and then it moves on to 7, and so you've got that area which is right adjacent to the railroad track where this bump out is. So yes, number 7 is part of it. Yes.
For those of you more into this thing than I am, as far as the business, what do we lose if we go with the field delineation? We lose a little bit of a wetland,
But the reality is on the ground,
right?
it's not wetland, right?
No.
Well, here's another thing to consider. What's actually
Yep.
going in that area that would be buffer that's not? If you look at the plan, am I correct in stating that's the infiltration pond? Or the infiltration basin?
It's in that area, Mr. Chairman, but it is not actually in the 50-foot buffer. We tried to keep that out.
Right, but it would have, had the original wetland line been pushed forward, that part of that infiltration basin may have ended up within the 50-foot buffer? Does that
Very likely.
make sense?
Yes,
Yes.
very likely. Yep.
So it's actually, you're going to be excavating, well, do you excavate in for that structure? Is that a,
For the pond?
yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're actually going to be removing some of that, well, maybe it's not fill there, but potentially it's some of that filled area that we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think, you were correct in stating that we would be in the 50-foot buffer here if the actual GIS wetland boundary was utilized. I do not think we would have been in the prime wetland as delineated on the
Correct.
GIS itself, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And so that's the lowest point, just to be clear on why the infiltration basin is there, because that is the lowest point on the developable
That's
portion
correct,
of the
yeah.
property.
The lower contours continue to go down in this direction, but compared to everything here, definitively, that is the low point.
I have a quick question, just
Sure.
to get more at your point. So where you do change that line, what are you proposing for that area? Is it just going to be a grassland? I'm sorry if this is a repeat question.
Yeah, that's all getting restored up to where you see the silt fence just beyond the pond, the proposed pond. And it gets seeded down with a semi-shade grass and forb mix, which is a New England wetland conservation seed mix that is pretty much specifically designed, Jim, is it not, for wetland buffers, to restore wetland buffer areas?
Correct.
And then the prime wetland itself, what gets disturbed for soil will be seeded down with the actual conservation wet mix.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So so that's an interesting question though. So there may be areas of fill in the 50-foot buffer. And will that be enough just to seed it? Because you can't
I would
really
defer to Jim, but
disturb-
I think that's typically how those get finished.
I mean,
It's kind of a,
Yeah,
well, I guess theoretically, we could try to remove some of the fill in there. If we do that, obviously, we're going to be taking the final wetland boundary and moving it back closer to the prime wetland boundary that was on there. I mean, it's not that it couldn't be done. It absolutely could be done. It's a relatively small amount of excavator work, and we could absolutely reseed that with the wet mix instead of the upland mix. The only reason we hadn't really suggested that because we were trying to sort of keep the status quo as much as possible. Just say, okay, I'm trying to be kind of minimalistic here in that I just really want to try to get rid of the trash and the debris and the cans and the outbuildings and all the other stuff that's in there, and then just say, okay, whatever, when we scuff it out, we'll just make sure we reseed it and let kind of nature take over. So that was the intent. Yes, it can be done, that in that area, this kind of bump, let's call it a bump out area. The bump out area, we can remove some of that fill and make that wetland as well. It's not going to really have any detrimental impact to either the design of the pond or the design of the buildings. It would just make more wetland there, which, and again, it's not very difficult because essentially it's just basically taking 18 inches of material off and then seeding it down. So that's an option that we can, if the commission is so interested, we can do that. At the end of the day, in that area that's restored, again, you'll have the same issue that we have if we go with the prime wetland boundary without changing it, which is the buffer numbers will change. But I'm
on the
not
ground-
sure that matters. You know, I'm not sure that matters.
Yeah, you don't, right, you're not gonna change the design can't really change.
The design's not going
As
to
it
change,
stands.
but the buffer numbers would change. Does it? It's up to you. So,
Yeah, and I had a similar question to this effect, and I guess the fact that the design doesn't change almost in some way seems more compelling to do it, right? Because you, as the applicant, benefit from not having to change the design. And the town and these abutters benefit from having increased wetland and floodwater storage and wildlife habitat and less area of fill. So that's my current thinking, is that it seems beneficial.
Yeah, it does too in terms of, if you look at where the drainage is, so the outlet to that infiltration basin is roughly into that area, if I'm
yeah,
correct.
into the lobe. Right.
Into that low area, which is
yeah.
this bump out area we're talking about, because that outlet's into the 50-foot setback. So at high flows, what is that area gonna look like? It would certainly benefit to have a nice cover over there to infiltrate if you have a packed gravel. I don't know what the fill is, but.
Oh, it's nothing wonderful. And structurally, it's nothing wonderful. It looks like it was a mix of things that got accumulated over the years. I mean, if you go and look at some of the places out there, not in where we're talking about, you have this packed gravel, and other places where we are talking about, it looks to me like there was some topsoil just brought in and dumped there and kind of moved around. So, it's nothing, that area of the bump out is nothing like concrete blocks or something like. At least I don't think there's concrete blocks down there. I think from what I could gather from the test bits we did, it's more or less kind of, honestly, it's junky fill is what it is.
And have they borrowed other material from like the hill on the site? Is there a borrow area?
I don't think, at one time I thought so. I actually was under the impression, and I think I mentioned this to the site coordinator, that I thought that this was actually like a borrow pit.
Yeah.
And it's just, well, it turns out that I actually found natural soils in that upland area. And it was actually sand over clay, and I had a good profile. I had some decent profiles that actually looked natural. So now, I think I'm realizing that both the slope on the railroad track and also the slope that goes to the abutters to the north, that was actually all fill that was brought in. So believe it or not, I think we actually had some natural soil there up against where that berm was, and then as we transition down toward the wetland, it was down on the lower areas where I think he was trying to make upland, so to speak. Yeah. I was surprised. Let me put this, I was surprised I had natural soil there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I would be in favor of, I don't know what the solution is there, and I mean, I generally agree with you that you just want to get rid of the junk in your approach to this remediation of the site, but it might make sense in this area, given that it was a wetland and there's fill, and it's receiving a significant amount of water that's being directed that way. that some additional measure in there to improve the site may help improve the overall wetland water retention, improve the water quality that's flowing into the prime wetland there.
Yeah, we can, that's something that would be, that bump out area, to do that would absolutely be very possible.
Something to
And I say it's
water
just-
flow,
but
you know?
it is going to change the numbers, however. It will change the numbers because we're going to do a restoration, so then we'll probably restore it back to roughly where the prime wetland boundary is now. And so we'll probably be looking at different numbers on the buffer. But, you know, as long as you folks are okay with different numbers on the buffer, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the heart of this process, and that's what I've appreciated about this process, right, is this ongoing dialogue. So I think we would bring this institutional memory, you know, I mean, we still would evaluate the wetland permit as we would always evaluate a wetland permit, but we would know why the numbers increased.
Yeah, and the only thing I would point out specific to keeping it as it is that once that's reestablished with the grass and forb mix, so you've got a vigorous vegetation growing, it's actually beneficial for the stormwater that after it's treated and exits that pond, that you have, what you're going to do is you're going to bring the wetland closer to the source of the stormwater outlet, as opposed to having that minimum 50-foot buffer strip, which does provide, albeit probably de minimis, some additional treatment and dissipation of the stormwater coming out of that pond. I just wanted to put that out there for that perspective.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking out loud here, so I don't claim to have all the solutions to what would be best out there, but it seems like something other than a fairly impacted fill area, there could be an improvement made to it. If it is a gravel and it does take water, maybe that's okay, I don't know. I haven't seen it, it just seems like it's a funny spot to me.
And the other thing I'm thinking is, say it were to remain as a upland, is a forb grass, right? Like some mix ideal. I mean, certainly we want that, but is it beneficial to also have, you know, real diversity and root depth and get shrubs and trees in there as well? Those were the two alternatives in my head.
Well, they'll come eventually, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, okay, if you put seed down this year in what was a very prolonged drought, and now we've had 8 inches of rain in a week, I think, you know,
Yeah.
having some plantings in addition to seed seems prudent. Especially if there's Phragmites on site, which I think I read. Like,
There are invasives. I think are there Phragmites? You know, we saw bittersweet and some other invasives. I'm trying to remember. I know Carlos, who's not here anymore, which is sad, was there and we looked at that. But, all right, so where do we go from here?
Are we ready?
This has been a good discussion.
Are we ready to tackle the first motion? Do we want to
So,
amend the front one? I guess that's.
yes, I guess I'm okay with amending the prime wetland boundary to match field conditions. That makes sense to me. It may mean we want to make some condition about this bump out area. as a, I don't know if there are any other comments. Okay. So I guess I'll motion that we've reviewed the field-based wetland mapping and designated prime wetland boundary presented with this application, and we are supportive of amending the prime wetland boundary to match the field conditions.
Do we need someone to second the motion?
We
Is that
do,
right?
yeah.
Or I can second the motion, but I'm not sure if
Thank
we're
you.
voting tonight.
Oh, yes, we didn't talk about that. You can be voting, so you can definitely second it. You're signed up. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other discussion?
Well, do we want to put in a recommendation regarding the bump out?
What would that be in the conditional use permit part?
Oh,
Because this is relation
This
to
is
the
strictly-
DES submittal rule change. Am I correct in
right.
how I'm
right,
approaching this?
Right, and that would be part of
The amending the prime wetland boundary to match existing field conditions will show up in the application. So I guess it's not actually part of the CUP at this point in time right now. It's more of a, you're right, it's actually more of a DES. But I like the idea of getting this support so we know where we're going and not leaving the prime wetland boundary where it is. So that would be
Yeah.
good to get that support.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like it's not based on current conditions, so I don't know why we would support a inaccurate boundary at this point, but
Say we all felt that, or majority of us felt that removing that fill and bringing the elevation down to that of what would presumably be a wetland was what our suggestion is, would in fact wouldn't we effectively be asking them to keep the wetland at the GIS wetland boundary? And then now the new field-based wetland boundary would be
I would have to
inaccurate.
re-revise it after they've revised it once.
Yeah. Maybe we
That's too
do.
complicated for me at this moment.
There. All of that is to say, maybe as a commission, we just need to talk a little bit more about what everyone thinks might be a good recommendation for the bump out. Even if that's not a part of, because that might help determine this
Okay,
motion. Right?
I guess my thought on increasing, removing the fill to increase the wetland, although it would increase the stormwater ability to manage it, how much would it really increase it versus how much disturbance it would experience because of the excavation? So I don't know if it's worth it on that front.
Yeah, because what was it, 2,000 feet you said about?
That's an approximation.
Yeah.
but
yeah, I guess the separation between the wetland and as Christian said, separation is valuable between the wetland and the discharge of the catch base, or the infiltration basin. But I wonder, are there other things that could be done besides besides digging to improve that bump out area that would be outside of wetland boundaries, or excavation type activities like plantings, or something else that I'm not thinking of?
Yeah, and if that's the pleasure of the commission, I don't think that Frank would have any issue with infill planting of some shrubs and, an errant red maple or two, something that's gonna like its feet wet. Well, you don't want to make them too dense.
You have the tree committee over here, just so you know.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to forest the thing because then it's not going to look natural or behave naturally at all.
Right, and it's hard looking at a map without being on site, so I always struggle sort of making these decisions while looking at a site plan.
That sounds like a
So-
good middle ground, though. to-
Yeah,
Yeah, just propose some wetland shrubs.
Yeah, and that way there's less site disturbance and runoff into the wetlands during construction, so that seems like a decent.
Yeah, and actually, Kristen, to that end, that's probably going to, I know one of the things that we wanted to see that came out of TRC is that 50-foot buffer, once it gets established, doesn't get mowed on an annual basis, and I think some woody vegetation would probably act to prevent that as well.
And that would address a lot of rain after a drought issue and management there. Okay.
okay. So that sounds like we're moving towards a condition of, well, we haven't gone through all the conditions of the CUP.
But that's the next motion.
I think
Yeah.
we're back to the boundary.
But so now we're okay, it sounds like we're okay with the boundary, and the motion that's been made and seconded still stands.
Right.
And we have not amended that motion, so should we vote on it? I would say we should.
Yes.
Okay, now how do we vote? This is different.
By voice.
We just go around.
All those in favor?
All those we all say it at the same time?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, like
Okay, you guys ready? Is everyone ready?
okay. Or do you want
Am I
paper,
voting
scissors? Is
tonight?
that-
Yes, so 7, right?
We have 7? Okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those not in favor say nay. So it's 7-0 regarding the wetland boundary adjustment. Okay. So now we can review the items presented in the CUP. The conditions, 1 to 8. Now, there's one summary of them, or there's one memo that has a response, and then there's some additional backup. So I guess I'll let Christian, do we want to go through these? Responses that you've submitted?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
And then I'll let Jim go through number 3, because that was what was largely revised after the TRC review.
Okay. So
So-
does the commission see where we are in our packet? Okay. I'm going to rip this out. Okay. So condition 1 is that the proposed use permit is permitted in the underlying zoning district.
Yep, and this is the R5 district, multifamily district allows for these dwellings as proposed.
Okay, there's no alternative design which does not impact a wetland or wetland buffer, or which has less detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer is feasible.
Right, and our opinion is we have tucked the proposed development as far northwest as we possibly can to maintain as much separation from that wetland and minimize the buffer impacts to the extent possible. That's fairly evident looking at the design of the plan.
Yep, from the last time we saw the plan, have there been major revisions? Was there under parking last time? I know we talked a fair amount about parking.
Well, that I think, Mr. Chairman, was specific to the contemplation between a multifamily garden-style apartment building versus the townhomes. All of these will have a single garage within them on the first floor, but the parking under was a contemplation of the apartment building, and we got the strong impression that was asking too much with regard to impervious area in this location. So this is what we've, I believe the first time we came in with something similar to this, but the buildings were not quite oriented the way they were. They were a bit more into the buffers, and then we came in with a slight revision to the townhouse concept and the size of the building that it would require to utilize the density for the apartment building. It got too big, and even with the parking under, there was still an awful lot of parking required at ground level, outside, exterior parking. So this is what we wound up with, and just tried to tuck everything into that southeast corner the best we could. And Jim, you want to hit number 3?
Sure. So, all right. So I think the issue is about the enhancement of the function and values based upon what we're doing. And it is not just the fact that we are removing some of these structures from the prime wetland itself, though that certainly is a good thing to do, simply because these are man-made, in some case impervious areas, which certainly don't lend themselves at all to wildlife habitat, with perhaps the exception of maybe a few skunks and rats. But the real key is what's happening within that 50 feet. And I feel even better about it now when we start talking about the fact that on the bump out, we're thinking about the I can certainly add some shrubs in there that would be beneficial. But in that 50 feet, we're also going to be removing some compacted gravel. We're also going to be removing some of the pavement that's there, and restoring that to pervious surface, basically soil with plantings on it. So in essence, I don't think there's any question that the change from the condition today to what's being proposed will absolutely benefit the wildlife. So that's my thoughts on it. I think that was the major issue. Certainly the water quality aspects that we've already talked about with regard to cleaning up the runoff, controlling the runoff, basically keep controlling the runoff from the existing lawn areas that are draining down through there, certainly would also be a water quality benefit. But I think you already knew about that. So I think maybe I just had to address the wildlife issue a little bit more.
Yeah, and I know it was in here somewhere that you added curbing around the edge of the parking to catch stormwater and direct it into the
I can point that out to you very quickly, Mr. Chairman. What I had initially designed was basically a low sump or a gutter at the end of the parking stalls to bring it into this corner. And through TRC, nobody liked that aside from me. So what we've done is we've carried the Cape Cod berm all the way at the end. Now we have just a common slope from the end of these buildings down to the curbing. It will run down and just enter the pond or the sediment forebay at the corner, at this corner instead of at the corner at the end of the line striping of the stalls.
Yeah, so that seems, in terms of the management of runoff at this site, will be greatly improved. In some aspects. Okay, so that's number 3. Are there other wet functions and values? So, condition 3, the wetland scientist has provided an impact evaluation that includes the functions and values of the wetlands. and an assessment of potential project-related impacts and concluded to the extent feasible that the impact is not detrimental to the value and functions of the wetlands or the greater hydrologic system. Do we have any concerns about them meeting that condition, given what's been presented? Okay. Condition 4 is that the design, construction, and maintenance of the proposed use will, to the extent feasible, minimize detrimental impacts on the wetland or wetland buffer.
And it's our feeling that, the proposed layout has been designed to do just that and in fact improve a fairly ugly situation in both the buffers and the wetlands as it sits. Can't be configured completely outside the WCD due to the shape of the existing lot of record and the edge of the wetlands as they have been field delineated. But, again, this kind of goes back to my first comment about how we've gone through several iterations of organizing and orienting these buildings and the parking stalls to basically do our very best to keep them as far away from the edge of wetland as we possibly can.
This is one thing that I think came up, maybe even Ginny brought it up, who's also not here anymore. There's no real lawn area. So is the buffer going to become a lawn area for people to use?
Absolutely not. I mean, that was kind of made very clear at TRC that when this is restored, there's going to be in the homeowners association declaration a prohibition of cutting in that 50-foot buffer. That's the whole point, is that we want this to grow back. And as I said, Mrs. Osterwood's comments with regard to the implanting of shrubs, some woody vegetation in there will actually serve to limit that, because you're not going to take a common lawnmower to a shrub.
So they really just aren't going to have any really outdoor play space at this development?
There is not a great deal. There's a little bit out behind the buildings themselves, but, and these are going to be, Frank, two-bedroom units? Yeah, they're all going to be two-bedroom, so the likelihood that, there's going to be many children out here is pretty slim.
Uh-huh. It's not age-restricted or anything, it's just a normal...
That's correct.
This is a normal HOA,
Yep.
These will be condos?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'm okay with 4. Are there any other? I mean, it sounds like with TRC, you've addressed all the maintenance issues that get addressed normally. We can move on to 5. The proposed use will not create a hazard to individual or public health, safety, and welfare due to the loss of wetland, the contamination of groundwater, or other reasons.
And our position is that, the wetland area itself, where it's been historically disturbed, is going to be restored. In addition, the removal of the debris field within the prime wetland and the buffer will remove old machinery, tractors, and other demolition debris that exists in the WCD currently, and we feel that can only be deemed an improvement to what's there today.
Certainly in terms of public safety, it's not a particularly safe site at the moment. So,
And even as it pertains to stormwater, I mean, now at least
yeah,
all the impervious area is getting treated.
yeah. Okay, we can keep moving. Unless there's any comments, jump in, anyone, please. Number 6, the applicant may propose an increase in wetland buffers elsewhere on the site that surround a wetland of equal or greater size or of equal or greater functional values than the impacted wetland. Doesn't really apply.
Yeah, because the only impact of the wetland is restoration. And, we've done everything we can. We've kept the pavement a minimum of 50 feet away from the wetland edge and kept the building area all outside the 100-foot setback. And obviously, neither of these is the situation as the parcel exists.
In cases where the proposed use is temporary or where construction activities disturb areas adjacent to the immediate use, the applicant has included a restoration proposal revegetating any disturbed areas within the buffer with the goal to restore the site as nearly as possible to its original grade and conditions following construction.
And I think we've been through this on a number of different fronts throughout the hearings and tonight. We will be now proposing to add, we'll work with Jim Gove's group on that, the shrub plantings within the 50 feet. Any stumps will be ground and not yanked out of the ground that happen to be disturbed by the restoration. Are there blown down trees in that area, Jim? I thought I saw some to some extent, but in any event.
To a certain extent, where possible, I'm going to try to keep some of those trees present because, they offer habitat. So if it's possible to keep some of those blown down trees without and still make it possible for us to get the debris out, that's fine, because, you could walk through the woods, you see a tree leaning or partially down, and you see a whole bunch of, critters in there, basically making nests and so forth. So I think what I would like to make clear that we aren't going to necessarily get some of those leaning trees or some of the blowdowns out if we can help it, because I do think they add actually a habitat feature. So we're going to be minimizing that as much as we can.
And I guess regarding the disturbance areas, it's come up, but we haven't really addressed the issue of invasive species. So I guess I would be curious, is there sort of a management plan? Because I don't know who's going to be actually doing the physical removal of these structures, and will that drag vegetation from one part of the site to another?
I'm sure that will be controlled, Mr. Chairman, through DES, because that was part of the conversation at the pre-application meeting as well, with regard to invasives. And, the procedures are fairly standard. If there are pick an invasive Phragmites out there, which I'm not certain how prevalent those are out there, but essentially you wait till those have essentially gone by for the year. You cut them down onto plastic sheets, you take them out of the wetland area, you just leave them covered until they completely rot, essentially, and then it gets carted off to a landfill.
Okay, so is this, you're telling me this, is this somewhere in the, it's not, that'll be a condition of the
I'm presuming that will come out.
EMP as associated with the wetland approval, or?
That's my understanding. Jim, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, typically what we do in situations where we're doing restoration plans, we have a pretty standard invasive species control plan that we add into it because it's restoration. And so I have no reason to think that we aren't going to have that same kind of plan added into the application. It'll be more of an application, though it's going to be part of it. Essentially, so it'll become part of a condition of a permit rather than part of a CUP. A CUP is different than a permit in a way. So at least the DES, I'm thinking that this would be a condition in the DES permit. So.
Okay. Well, we could condition it in our approval here tonight that I would say that would make sense. Okay, so we're still on number 7. which is looking at, temporary soil disturbances. Are there any other comments?
Yeah. I think related to, I agree that we definitely want to see an invasive species control plan. So thanks for bringing that up. I would also think you would want to get those out of there before they go to seed, not once they've gone by. And then the other thing I'd like to see related to the seeding and shrubs and possible errant trees are like an adaptive management plan. So say you have something like less than 70% success, you'll go in and do it again, right? We want to see some level of success in this restoration.
And I think that will certainly be a condition of the DES permit, will it not, Jim?
Always is.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
That's regarding the wetland. Not the buff, they don't control the buffer. So we're talking here about what we want to see in the buffer. So let's be clear about that.
Yeah, and the commission can make, again, a condition
Yeah.
to the buffer, similar to what DES is going to govern within the wetland itself.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, and it all kind of comes down to timing of, when is this work actually being done? And obviously, we don't know that necessarily yet, but you're probably looking to do this next building season or this year, or who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, our first formal planning board hearing, Mr. Koff, is set for August 26th due to the lack of a planning board hearing on July 22nd, and then the CIP taking the first hearing in August. So that will be our first planning board hearing.
Yeah.
Will be the end of August, so.
The other aspect on this, on the DES permit, when we file it, at a minimum, it's going to be 50 days.
Yeah,
Minimum 50 days.
because it's a major wet
Yeah.
dredge and fill,
Correct. Yep.
so it's a 50-day
Yep.
period. Well, then that has to, because you have to come back before us anyways for that.
With that application,
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so that gives us a window
Yep.
to review it. Okay. Anything else? Okay, number 8 is about all required permits like we're talking about, so I don't see the need to, that's somewhat assumed. Are there this doesn't qualify for AOT, this we're under.
Not remotely close.
Yeah. There's no other state permits.
No, because we're on water and sewer, that will be the sole DES permit required, was the dredge and fill.
Excellent. Any other thoughts? So, sounds like we have sort of 3 conditions, assuming we're moving towards approving this, which feels like the direction we're moving. We have the including an invasive species control plan, similar to what would be included in the wetland permit within the buffer area. We have the shrubs. I don't know how detailed we want to be regarding, I guess we could just we're recommending to the planning board the addition of shrub plantings within the 50-foot buffer area as applicable or as deemed reasonable.
I mean, it might be helpful to have rough numbers, just how will the planning board know that they've satisfied your intent,
Yeah, that's kind of what feels like And we talked about it mostly, we didn't talk about it in terms of the whole 50-foot buffer. I know we talked about it predominantly in that bump out area in the southern part of the site.
If I may, the standard, well, we use a mitigation manual from the Corps of Engineers, and the standard they have for woody species is 10 feet on center. So it's just to let you know.
One shrub planted 10 feet on,
No, so in other words, you do 10 feet, you move 10
10
feet,
feet.
then you come down this way 10 feet, and you go over that 10 feet, and you go over this way 10 feet, and you go over that way 10 feet. Right. That's the standard spacing that they provide for trees and shrubs. Yep.
And do they have a condition about how, how many you have to be surviving in so many years? Or
80%.
in first year or
Well,
2 years?
typically it's a 2-year monitoring,
Okay.
and it's 80% survival.
All right, I'll go for it. We have reviewed this application and recommend that the wetland conditional use permit be approved with the following conditions. That trees and shrubs be planted in the buffer at a density dictated by the Army Corps manual. That an invasive species control plan be provided, and that a monitoring and adaptive management plan be provided for the restoration plantings.
Second.
okay, any further discussion? I think that covers a lot of the ground. Okay. All right, unless there's no other comments, I guess we'll vote again, all at the same time. Still is freaking me out a little.
So easy.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, this motion passes 7-0.
Thanks very much, folks.
Yeah.
And I agree with it. It is weird. This is my first in-person meeting for a long time. It's weird.
It's nice to see people's faces all the time.
Yeah. Could use a little air conditioning.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
could
know
use a
what's
little
going on
conditioning up
here.
here. It's up there.
No one's gonna come back in here. We're all gonna.
Oh, yeah, my computer was
Thank you.
Thank you. Is everyone doing okay? I know it's hot in here.
Sorry?
All right, I guess we'll move right along to the tree ordinance. Thank you guys for patiently waiting.
Good idea.
Thank you. Okay, so we can put this paper aside. Let me get reorganized. Does everyone, I hope some folks have had a chance to read it. So we talked about it at our last meeting. They gave us homework to read it. But if you guys want to present on it, I don't know how, why don't you present on it and then we can discuss as needed?
Sure. I'm Eileen Flockhart. What we've done here is something that's been sort of a process that started out as a requirement of Tree City USA to have a tree ordinance, and then we went looking for our tree ordinance and we couldn't find it because it wasn't there. We have regulations, but nothing very organized. So then we started looking at different ordinances all over the country and locally around here and different sized towns to try to figure out what might match. And what we're doing is really two parts. And we're just working on the first part, which has taken us since the subcommittee began working on it last August. And so we're looking at creating the ordinance itself, and then what will happen in the second part of it would be really kind of standards and specifications that would give you more specific guidelines on recommended trees and how to do this and how to do that. But the basic ordinance itself is kind of like the guts of why do you do this and why do we need a tree ordinance, and defining a bunch of stuff. So you probably, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to look this over with us, because we sometimes feel like we're stabbing in the dark, and to just have some input from people who know a little bit more about conservation kinds of things than some of us who are volunteers. And we've got great people on the committee who've been fabulous, so it's not all the blind leading the blind, but so we appreciate you folks giving it a good hard look, and feel free to be critical or say, why did you put that in there, or whatever. But certainly the purpose of it was to give the town an idea that trees are not just something we would like to have. Trees have economic value. Trees have, value for a myriad of reasons. And when we look at it, we have to look at the big picture and say, you're not just planting trees, you're planning for them. You're saying to the people planting bushes, what's your percentage of success, So when we planted any of the trees we've done in the last year or two, we're really concerned that we're going to have them survive. So that's been one of the things we've worked on. And then to have the tree warden on our committee, and he's been there, Jay's been there from the get-go when we first sat around in my backyard at a picnic table. And so his desire to make things work and to have it really come up, be a little bit more visible to the community, and to do things with schools and folks who are interested in whether we planted some memorial trees, and there was a great deal of interest in that. What other kinds of things can happen that raise people's awareness of the value of trees from many aspects, and there have been great studies that say, number of trees around your house increases, with all the heat or the rain, that there are economic values to having trees keep your house cooler and protect you and all that sort of stuff. So it's trying to figure out a way to communicate the big picture and give some clear direction to, the select board and some sort of enforcement. And, there are towns like Portsmouth that have a whole huge committee, and they have very strict enforcement, and they have a town council who can levy a fine and say, you screwed this up and you owe us $1,000, and, I don't think we've got that capability, at least not at this point, but at some point, we'd like to be able to say, we all have a responsibility to take care of the trees. And so if you have questions about any of the sections, I know that the tree warden section is fairly extensive, and we were trying to say, there are people in town that don't even know we have a tree warden. And then we suggested maybe we could do a little TV spot and tell people about it. And then Jay got nervous and he said, if too many people know that, they're going to be calling me on the phone and I will never get any highway work done. When he's got to wear a couple of hats, it's a tough call. So, but But we do want to do things like educational things, use Bob's resources on the TV for, what does this kind of bug look like? And is it wrecking your tree, or what does this look like? Or can kids identify trees? We want to do a labeling of trees in Swayze Parkway so that people can recognize and get to learn what some of the trees are. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that we would like to explore. So the tree ordinance was a way to just sort of fine tune what we were trying to do, but then the tree committee itself has a million ideas, and so this is sort of the nuts and boltsy kind of thing.
I can give you a concrete situation.
Yeah.
And if you could walk us through how the tree committee would want to handle it. We just started the process last week or the week before, where we went through the parkway. And
Right.
there's some trees that are dead, hazardous, other ones that are diseased, and then other ones that are just in need of pruning.
Right,
And we went through and marked them, coded them basically with whether they need to come down
Right.
or they just need pruning work. And then there's also several of the larger ones that we want to get some diagnosis done on.
Right.
The interior health of them, the structural integrity. And so this sounds like something that, this isn't in effect yet. It's still, we might as well start practicing.
right.
So how would you want to handle that? Would you want Jay just involved, or would you want the entire committee involved?
Well, I think initially, Jay, let's say it's Swayze Parkway, you'd want Jay and you'd want the trustees of the Swayze Parkway to be involved in, when we took a little tree walk down there, and they were
Right.
showing us, trees that were cabled and things that they were really trying to hang on to, and things that, maybe are not going to last forever. So how do you make that decision? You would start with Jay, as a decision maker. But then he might say, look, we need more expertise on this. We need, he's also hindered by, if he needs, to prune something and he doesn't have the equipment, he's got to rent it, he's got to do this and do it.
We're, as part of what we're doing, we're also, we've also voted to, once this marking was done, then to go out and get some quotes on the work being performed.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it wouldn't become a burden.
Yeah, all right.
He can only, he's great, he'll do anything, but
Yeah, right.
he does too much already.
Well,
And,
yeah,
So, we've kind of started the process in motion.
right.
And, but I'd also like to have it proceed according to what's being proposed here.
Right.
Might as well set a good example, right?
Well, and I think it's the kind of thing that we have to look at and say, okay, what would be, in that case, what would be the first step? And maybe the first step is your, assessment of it. And then the second step would be pulling Jay in, and then looking to say, even though he's the tree warden and can do a lot of stuff, at what point do we say we need to pull in other experts to make an assessment, get a quote?
Well, we're going to get 3 quotes.
Right.
And we've identified the companies we're going to contact.
Right.
And then there's 2 trees in particular that we want to, one of the big pin oaks.
Yeah.
We're not too sure about what's going on inside of that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the birch tree.
Yeah.
Get somebody that can do some borings on it to just see just how much the rot has extended throughout the trunk of the tree.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-step process we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'm assuming the other trustees would agree with me that having the involvement of this tree committee would be a good thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, when you look at something like the birch tree, that I don't know about your kids, but my kids have all grown up with that birch tree when you can actually climb it, and it's, it's a huge piece of Exeter history, and so that to look at it and say, all right, we need to either do something to save it, and maybe then the committee says, okay, well, then we have Save the Birch, activity going on, and we have something or other that gets organized so that the funds become available as they need to happen, so that it doesn't, Jay's tree budget is fair, it's limited. He does have an okay budget, but things get cut.
The Parkway has money.
Yeah.
So, we don't know until we start getting some quotes back what we're really looking at.
Right.
And everybody loves the birch tree. Everybody wants to hang on to it. But it's something we also got to get a handle on.
Right.
How close are we to it becoming a hazard?
Yeah, you don't want it falling on somebody's head.
Exactly. And so that's why we need that assessment.
Yeah.
That to me is probably the most critical one that needs to be assessed.
Yeah.
So just to kind of elaborate a little bit on how the ordinance is set up, the tree committee basically is there to offer support to Jay as the tree warden.
Right.
All of the permits and permissions go through Jay. He would be the one to, approve or deny a request to cut a tree down in a town right of way.
Right.
And so the tree committee is working to develop planting standards, so that trees are properly planted, a list of approved species, and then to basically be there in support of Jay's effort should he need some additional consultation. So in this case, it's Swayze Parkway. There's going to be a lot of concern about what's happening with the trees in Swayze Parkway. So that's a great opportunity for the tree committee to show their support of whatever decisions are being made by being included in the process.
Well,
so it's not mandated, like it doesn't have to go from, the request to Jay, then the tree committee has to sign off and approve and have a meeting. It's not quite like that. It's not that formal.
I get that.
But
I just want to, it's like anything else, there's going to be some, some growing pains and trying to figure out how it's all going to function.
Yeah.
This is probably a good test case for that. Like I noticed one thing in here, it said was that Jay would be in charge of any planting that takes place on public land. And, he's done a fabulous job, the stuff at the Park Street Common, the elm tree in the triangle.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't ask for trees to do better than they're doing now.
Yeah.
Especially considering what we've been going through for weather.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think what we want to think of this tree ordinance and the tree committee as not so much a chain of command as sort of everybody's a support system for each other. And, we're a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. We're not, some bureaucratic hoo-ha so much as we are volunteers who are working to make sure that some of this stuff works and people understand it and they learn about it, and it becomes, of course, everybody knows that's what you do if you want to plant a new tree, not sure what kind. You go to the tree committee, they have a list of, new tree, native species and nurseries where you can find them, or you want to know what this bug is that's digging into your tree, and here's that sheet and the photos of all those bugs. So it becomes as big an educational tool as it is a restrictive. I don't want to see it as restrictive so much as protective.
Right.
And certainly when issues come up like that, where you have to make a decision, is it really now? Is it a hazard? When in the definitions there, there were several things that have to be met for it to be called a hazard, and if it's really something that could.
Well, I think from a PR standpoint, having the tree committee involved would be a
Yeah.
great thing, because, if a bunch of trees start coming down, it's going to scare some people.
Yeah,
And they're not going to understand what's going on.
right.
And so, the educational aspect
Yeah.
of why it's taking place is big.
And then the other thing that we talked about was the tree committee is there to support Jay in budget requests. This, by formalizing what the, his responsibilities and standards are, having an inventory of our street trees, all of that will help justify any budget requests.
Right.
And so the tree committee could help with that aspect as well.
Yeah, and in line with that is that we have had an inventory done, you probably are aware of that, and we want to update that inventory to increase the biodiversity of the trees, because all of that adds to the health of your community. So we're also looking at, neighborhoods that might not have had as many trees planted, and make sure that there's an equitable distribution of trees, as well as native species, and consider all of those. So the tree committee has that knowledge base of having a database like the inventory to refer to and say, we'd love to have some more maples over there, or birches, or whatever.
Right.
So that when a tree comes down, too, because the nation as a whole is losing more trees because of so much development going on. It used to be about equal in terms of planting and cutting down, and now cutting down has increased over planting. So we really need to be replacing any tree that comes down, or lots of trees anyway.
Yeah, we had hoped, the inventory that was done, the tree inventory was done in 2017 in the summer. So we'd really, we were hoping maybe Dave Sharples or somebody was going to be able to find an intern, somebody who could do that. It doesn't look like it's happening this summer, but it's the kind of thing that, you can't protect the trees if you don't know what you got. And their whole areas, the inventory that was done was sort of a controlled downtown sort of space. It wasn't very expansive. And there's a whole lot of the town that we don't have information on. And there are ways to collect data. I know that Kristen was saying in Dover they have a neighborhood system where, how did they do it, Kristen? They had their phone.
So they used an app, Survey 123,
Right.
on their phone that fed into a GIS database. And so they had volunteers go out and do the inventory for them. But that data was reviewed and collected by an arborist in Dover. And so that's how they went through getting a broader inventory of the trees. There was training to the volunteers, and it was a really interesting approach, and I think something that we could do here. I've been working with Andy Swanson, the IT guy, to try to figure out how to get Survey 123, how to get our GIS layers, through the online ArcGIS format, so that we can have that happen.
And they did things like, here's your neighborhood streets. Would you like to do your 3 streets in your neighborhood? And I think some of the folks who started out doing it said, well, this was kind of fun. Can I do another street? Can I do another couple of streets? And, that's the sort of hands-on educational piece that you're sort of, it's like Tom Sawyer getting you to paint the fence, it's sort of like all of a sudden you're doing stuff, and the volunteers you have helping you out are getting that information. They're learning that as well. So that would be an ideal way to expand.
I think a lesson learned from the Dover project too is they engaged their county forester, so that would be a good resource for the tree subcommittee as well. Greg Jordan is ours, and he's, if you haven't already, he's great.
We have both Greg Jordan from UNH and AJ Dupuis, who's come and helped us a couple of times, and so we have some good resources that we can hit on, and that's been helpful for us because we've come through a lot of stuff to try to figure out where we are, and but I'd be happy to hear any other comments or suggestions you've had after flipping through this, or if you've had time to flip through it.
Eileen,
Go ahead.
well, first I compliment, I think this is a great idea. We've had it, in my time here, this is the third attempt at trying to get a tree group going in some ways. We even had a nursery, the Conservation
That's right,
Commission
years
had their
ago.
own nursery in the 90s, and we were planting trees around, but that kind of died out. So this is much more organized and much clearer, and I think it's just more comprehensive. I like the educational part of it, because we did run into people when we tried to plant a tree in a right-of-way in front of their house, didn't want it. Because it was going to be either falling down their house or, of course, they were only about 4 feet high at the time. But that was, I had one question though on your ordinance, under jurisdiction, I was confused. It says this includes public easements along public roads and to the property line. The Conservation Commission has its own procedures for dealing with trees on conservation land. Therefore, the ordinance does not apply to conservation easements. I'm a little confused on whether it's just not applying to easements or to lands that we also manage, such as the town forest and the places like that, which we call our lands.
Yeah, right.
But they're town.
Kristen, can you help me with
Yeah,
that one?
I'm not where you are, but.
Jurisdiction, the first page.
Oh, okay.
The beginning.
Yeah, so the intent was for not just easements, but conservation land. It shouldn't say easements, it should say conservation land, so it would
Yeah,
apply
okay.
to fee-owned, or
And
easements.
of course, we have a 10-page document about our procedures too, don't we?
But we have been, I do work with Jay, for
Yeah.
example, and we've kind of morphed our process in terms of how conservation land is laid out when it abuts a development. So in the past, we've had conservation land right up against private lots, and so Jay gets a ton of phone calls of people concerned about limbs falling, and it's been a town expense to go and remove them. But if you think of the Rose Farm, for example, we had a 50-foot buffer in between the private property and then a 50-foot HOA maintained area, and then the conservation began. So that'll eliminate the risk to houses and the impact on the tree budget and Jay's time for stuff that, because if you think about how many miles of boundary we have that abuts private land, it could get onerous quick, so.
And you're not touching private lands, I guess. But educationally, I think there's an opportunity to, when people get nervous about, well, this tree is too close to my house, I want them all down because they're all.
Well, we had the discussion at a meeting, and one of the arborists on the committee, Kevin, was saying, I try to talk to people and say, look, it doesn't need to come down. You can prune it, you can take care of it, you can do this, you can do that. Let's just, don't panic. All they need to do is hear that they see on TV, a tree fell on your house. That's it. My house is next. I know it. I'm sure we're going to die. And you do the little bit of education and say, let me show you, exactly how this tree grows. And it does need this, but it's not dying. It's not going to keel over. So yeah, there's a lot of educational focus for that sort of stuff. So hopefully people will be happier, but you really, as much as we would love to get into tree supervision on private land and suggestions and everything, it's like,
somewhere.
Yeah, good luck with that, but if it were my money for any new development or anything, if you're going to cut down a significant tree, you can't just plant a little baby cherry tree and call it good.
You do have a section on private trees where you say that if the tree warden determines that a private tree is hazardous, they'll send a certified letter. Is there any follow-up to that? Or, does the town have ultimate
I think, when there is a tree on private land, but it's leaning over, it's got a limb that's dead, it's determined that it's diseased and dead and dangerous, that homeowner gets notification from the town that it has to be dealt with, whether it's to be cut down or pruned or trimmed. And, it's probably similar to what the utility companies give you, 10 minutes to look at the paper and say, here we come, so.
Yeah, I think it's a great start, this ordinance.
The arborist on the utility committee is on our group too.
Yeah.
I was just curious about the development of this ordinance. Did you model it after another ordinance, or who'd you work with to?
We got some information through the Arbor Day Foundation first to say, okay, this is sort of the ingredients you need. And then we tried to look at other towns that had pretty well established tree committees or Portsmouth has a 20-year-old and more than that, very sophisticated tree committee. And they always meet at like 6:30 or 7 in the morning, so I never got to their meetings. But they probably did them on Google, on Zoom or something, but they have quite a system. They have inventoried every single tree in the city, every single tree. And, they have all kinds of systems and making sure that, but, we started to do things like getting these things called tree diapers around new plantings so that even in the drought, we can make sure that the trees survive. And now the little tree diapers look like balloons. They're so full of water. But there are ways to make sure that when you planted something, for a good 2 years or more if you can, you got to make sure that it gets water. Even that piece of information to give to families who want to plant a tree in their yard. You can't just throw it in the ground and walk away. You got to take care of it.
I made some comments. Nothing I think is huge and worthy of discussion, so I can just hand you this and then
Oh,
put
that would
my
be great.
email on the bottom if there's
That would be great.
questions. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. I remember it wasn't that long ago, a couple years ago, that you came before us and said, I want to create a tree committee. And look at where you all are now. So thank you all for this
The
effort.
thing that was amazing, Allison, was that, after we met at the backyard and then we had some other meetings, people just kind of came. We had arborists, we had Deb and Gwen, and Kristen has been a huge help. Just the expertise that just kind of walked in the door, and so things we were able to do, and I couldn't have done them, but I sort of feel like an orchestra leader that doesn't know how to play the music, but I can at least put people around a table. And so we're going to meet tomorrow morning, so that would be great to have whatever comments you have. That would be great.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Eileen, for continuing on your pursuit of this great project. I just had a couple of questions about, or one is a recommendation in our town ordinances, the ones that have the dogs not allowed in the parks, of what streets they're named.
Oh, yes, right.
There's a section for trees that are downed along the river, because the town has the right-of-way on both sides of the river.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
you might not incorporate it, but refer to it in here, in this.
Okay.
Because I believe the way it's laid out is that if it's, whoever is the owner of the property that the tree is on is responsible for removing the tree if it falls into the river.
Oh.
So and it might not be the town, the tree might be that far back.
No, yeah, it could be, right. If you saw the way the river was gushing today, one could have been.
There's some carve out along the river, yeah. So look at that and see if you need to incorporate it.
Okay.
Or reference it, I guess. And then my other question was, when a tree in the public right-of-way has grown so large it's disrupting the asphalt sidewalk. I'm sure you've walked over a few of those somewhere. Is that something, you'd call the tree warden about that, asking what's the solution to getting rid of this lump in the broken sidewalk?
Well, I know that was an issue for the new sidewalk on Winter Street. And a big maple had pushed up the sort of pitiful sidewalk that was there that was going to be replaced. And they did take that tree down. I didn't see the whole procedure about how the decision was made, because I think it may have been the public right of way, but it was pretty close to a house. So somebody had to deal with that. But there are a number of places where, black asphalt sidewalks and trees are not happy together. No, they really aren't.
And so part of the effort also involves developing a list of street tree appropriate trees, so the right tree in the right place.
Yeah.
So ideally, when, Public Works has a project, there's a list of trees, with an ear toward native trees that are appropriate for that site. So,
And I think you mentioned that the arborist for the utilities is on your committee?
Yeah.
So when they come to my house and ask for the tree that possibly is in the town's right of way because it's right up next to the road.
Would you like her name and number?
Maybe, well, they haven't been around to trim lately, so.
Okay.
And now that I'm thinking about it, all the trees I have in question are on private property, so that's not your thing.
Yeah, but they can take them on private property because
Yeah, oh, I know.
they're a utility, but what they're supposed to do is also give you a tree. If they're
That's
taking
right.
20 trees down like they did on 150, I mean, it was incredible. And
Yeah.
so they knocked on some doors and gave you trees.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think the utilities spurred me to be to create this committee, because
the clear
one summer, they took down 90 trees, 90, and I went to Jay and I said, I want a list of every tree and I want to know why. I can hear a chainsaw and I go crazy. My husband says, it's not your job to do every chainsaw investigation.
We'll have to get you a uniform, the tree guard.
God, but, so then you look at it, and they were healthy trees. They were perfectly wonderful trees, and they were old trees, so.
And then the last thing is, when I was living down in Medford and I worked in Cambridge, there was a few streets that we'd go down where the trees had been impacted by pavement and were failing. And they had this program, and I'll send you a link to some examples of it, where if the tree was coming down, they would offer up not an RFP, but just give an opportunity to sculpture, three-dimensional artists, sculptors, and they have a whole series of chairs that are made out of tree trunks in place, in situ, that are just carved, with a back and a seat and possibly painted, and then some kind of preservation, is probably polyurethane, but so that, and like one is right outside of a school play yard.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they planted the tree that had to replace, but it was kind of nice to see the history of the tree remain, even though now it's also an example of how man has impacted the growth of the natural environment.
Yeah.
But I'd like you to take a look at it. It's not something that would go in here, but might be a
Yeah,
program.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
If something horrible ever happens to the birch, we can build a whole little table and chairs around it or something.
It's true.
We'll have tea parties, we'll have some,
Make a canoe.
make a canoe.
Birch bark canoe, yeah.
Don't you look at that yet.
I hope not.
No. And I did want to mention that the ordinance that we're doing is a town ordinance as opposed to, what was the other option? It's
Zoning ordinance.
A zoning ordinance. It's a town ordinance. So, at some point, if there was a problem, it would come down to the police department saying, this is a town ordinance, you can't do that. It's like, you can't take your dog on Swayze Parkway.
All right, well, thank you so much for all this. Are there any other comments? I'm supportive of it. I think $300 is not too much, so that's fine. I don't know, yeah, all the, I assume that there's some sort of legal review of this in terms of
Well,
all that.
that's
and I don't
probably-
think we need to get into that.
No,
tonight,
You know, at some point, we'll need to do that probably before we can go before the select board, which we'll have to do twice before they can approve it, so
but- Okay.
Well, we have to read it twice.
you'll see it twice.
Yeah, we read it publicly twice before we approve it, so there'll be 3 chances for the public to
okay.
comment on it.
Okay.
So
and-
Russ did suggest that a draft go before it goes to legal counsel, just to be sure the select board is on.
So would our town council be the one to look at the
Yeah,
ordinance?
it'll go through the town manager.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we pass the test. when it comes to that. Thank you all very much, appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we want to do I see Tim Shepherd is on. Maybe we do the Snowhounds first. And also, Sergio, I'm sorry, you had your hand raised earlier and we didn't call on you and your hand went down. I don't know if Sergio Bonilla on the call has a comment or not still, but we missed that and I'm sorry. But we can move to Tim Shepherd and the Snowhounds. Oh, Sergio, why don't we deal with Sergio first? If you can unmute Sergio, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello,
Hello.
Sergio, you're still muted.
I am not on my end. Maybe on your end? Can you hear me now?
It's not muted on this end.
Can you speak? Maybe we don't have speakers. Maybe you're,
No, it shouldn't be.
I'm not muted.
should
Be
be.
able to hear him. There's the man behind the curtain.
The man behind the curtain has arrived.
Oz is coming out.
You folks hear me at all?
And we have Tim Shepherd as well.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I don't,
Can you guys hear me at all?
what do you think?
How about now?
Do you know what's,
No, 100%. I have a few hunches.
okay. This is, so we can't get the audio in here. It sounds like you're unmuted, but we don't have audio. So bear with us for a minute, or we could go to the annual survey while we sort this out.
Yeah, let's do something.
Okay. While we try to get the folks on Zoom sorted out, why don't we move to the survey? We were going to go through this.
Went through it.
All right. So we sent this out before the weekend, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about a response, because we want to submit one response for the full commission. So what membership benefits have you used in the past year? Check all that apply. This is New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. Oh, okay, I won't go into detail. Technical assistance by phone or email? No. NHACC annual meeting, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lunch and learn workshops, I know I've attended. Have others? So, no.
We could include it.
No, I mean, I think the intent is to get commission.
Commission. I don't think I've been to those in the past year.
E-newsletter, do you guys review the
Yes.
e-newsletter?
Yeah.
Read it.
Conservation Commission handbook,
Yes. I've looked at that.
legislative updates on proposed legislation, yes.
Yes.
NHACC website for reference materials.
Yes. I've used that.
Okay, good. The second one, how often do you work cooperatively with other municipal boards, select board, planning board, budget committee, etc.? So the range is, we often work closely with other boards on joint projects, all the way down to we never work with other town boards. Where do you want to fall?
Are we sometimes or seldom? I feel like we've been seldom because I know, Allison, you went to those roundtables at one point. I know I haven't been to those.
Conservation
Don't they
roundtables
mean-
I've been to, but that's with other towns.
Oh, within,
I think
oh,
they
sorry,
mean
that's
within
the,
Exeter.
sorry, I'm jumping ahead to the next question. Within Exeter.
With other committees.
I would say we work often.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, we're, particularly with the I mean, we
Yeah, it's hard 'cause it's
communicate with
different for
the
different
planning
boards,
boards.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually.
Periodically, maybe is,
I was thinking periodically.
okay,
Like
let's go
closer to the
periodically.
planning board.
Okay, periodically.
Okay.
The next one, NHACC encourages collaboration among commissions to connecting them with regional neighbors. Do you regularly engage?
There's usually one of us at a roundtable,
Yeah.
right? So I would say, yes, we attend roundtable discussions on a regular basis, and that's hosted by Hampton. There's a Seacoast Conservation Commission roundtable that anyone is
Great.
available to go to.
Keep going, looks like. Previous surveys have identified these main topics as priorities that conservation commissions need assistance with. What are your top 3 topics? Should I just read through them, or do you have some, did you have some thoughts from reviewing it previously?
I mean, in the wetland applications, reviewing wetland applications is one that I would,
Yep.
is a priority. I know I've benefited from the annual meetings. They've had good resources for wetlands.
So that's one, okay? Okay. Do we just want to finish this one, or should we switch over to?
Why, can we finish while we're?
Yep.
So we need 2 other ones we need help with. The new commissioner workshop might be a good idea.
I was thinking that.
Great.
I need it.
Great. One more?
In the monitoring conservation lands, techniques for monitoring land conservation.
Maybe. We get a monitor. Most of you.
Well, we also lost one of our biggest monitors,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, we once had a system set up.
Named Carlos?
Yeah.
Effectively working with developers, what do you guys think about that one?
Yeah, I liked
Yeah.
that one.
Sure,
Instead of monitoring?
sure.
Did I influence you? Do we want to keep going down the list? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. How do you train new members to your commission?
I'd say mentorship.
Mentorship? Yep.
Trial by fire.
We
need it.
encourage, well, we always encourage people to go to the end.
It works.
Okay, we can do more than one. Do you have recent accomplishments or successes you think other commissions would benefit from hearing about? Please describe. So we can list multiple there. Do you just want to email me some thoughts that you might have there, or do you want to talk about them here tonight? Email. But promise me.
I was
you
thinking
can-
the Tree City USA would be a good one.
Tree, okay,
Township,
L-chip.
okay, great. Any others, just email me. Maybe before, today's Tuesday, by Friday, if possible. What benefit did you find least useful in the last year? So, back to that benefit list. Sounds like technical assistance, lunch and learn, or, well, those are the two that you didn't check.
What does technical assistance mean?
So it's like calling Barbara Richter for advice about X, Y, and Z.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Well, that's kind of how I feel. Like, we could be like, oh, hey, there's like this situation we're dealing with.
Yep.
And yeah, I would say, I wouldn't put that because that actually seems helpful.
Yep.
Can we just say NA? I don't think there's any benefits.
But are useful?
Yeah.
Okay.
They all seem useful to me.
Okay.
I reject that, the assumption that's embedded into that question.
Okay. Has your Conservation Commission completed a land conservation project in the past 3 years?
Yes.
Yes. Cole and Elliott, that may have been more than 3 years, but Cole certainly. If yes, did you work with a partner or land trust? So we can put SELT, but I don't know if that applies to that particular project. Yes? Or no? Yes? Okay. NA. Does your municipality have a land use change tax to fund conservation? We do not.
Source subject.
If yes, what is the percentage? What town do you represent? Exeter, right?
Yeah, we can agree on that.
Okay, good.
Oh, this is Exeter. Okay, we did that. Thank you.
Okay.
They do have that useful land use change tax list of all the towns, so I think that maybe goes into that. They'll update that, so
Yeah.
that's a useful thing.
And it's pretty unusual for a town to not take advantage of that.
Yes.
I will say.
Oh, these get the huge advantages, right?
Okay,
Okay, so we're moving on to the snow hounds trail use permission form. Do we have any comments on that? I see Tim Shepard is on the line. We might be able to hear you now.
Can you folks hear me?
Hey, all right, you're here. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, hi, members of the committee, hope everyone's having a good evening.
Thank you. So every 5 years, we give permission for the snowhounds to use the snowmobile trails through the conservation lands administered by the town. They are proposing no change in trail alignment. They also state they were not affiliated with any of the beaver dam modifications reported in the past few years. That's in the Oaklands?
Yeah.
Because, was there anything in the packet regarding this?
There was not.
There was not. So maybe do you want to just do a quick summary of where the snowmobile trail is, if not everyone's familiar with it, just very quick?
We've got a trail system starts through Epping and travels through Exeter, through Cuba Road, heads out towards Old Town Farm Road, across Beach Hill, up through Watson, and then up to the power lines also there. We've got almost 14 to 20 miles of trail, depending on what's open and what has snow, depending on the year.
And so this request only applies, so some of those parcels are managed by Fish and Game or others. Some of them are privately owned land that we have a conservation easement. This request only applies to the fee-owned properties that you have full control over.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, does anyone have any comments? I mean, we have not heard any complaints or issues that I'm aware of off the top of my head here. So I would move that we've reviewed this request and authorize me to sign something in support of renewing the trail use agreement as requested.
second.
Okay, that's been seconded. Any other comments? All right. We'll vote again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion passes 7-0.
Thanks for hanging with us for a couple hours.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Really appreciate everything you do, and there are a lot of happy snowmobilers. So, have a great one, right?
All right, hope we have a snowy winter.
Can you please send along the form to me?
Chris and I actually spoke with Steve, our trail administrator, earlier, and he said he sent a whole packet to you with the form as well, but I'll get it to resend that to you, all right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, folks.
Okay. You know, Drew, when we take a vote, I almost feel like you need a baton. You're so happy.
It's confusing to me. I'm like, where's Sally? We need a roll call. It's ingrained in my head. Okay, Sergio, I'm sorry we keep punting on you, but we're here for you now. Is this something on our agenda or not?
I think I received an invite, and I can only think it came from Kristen from the town today, because I dropped off a PPN yesterday. Basically, the applicant sort of waived the right to have you either not intervene or otherwise. Just take that time they've been working on it. PPN now is technically if we don't do signatures from RAC or from the con, then we're subject to 25-day review. Simple, straightforward, aluminum precast dock at 48 Franklin, tax map 72 lot 80. That's about the size of the temporary aluminum stairs from the lawn leading down to there. So it's seasonal, so it'll be removed in accordance with the DES guidelines, and it'll be installed in accordance with manufacturer's recommendations, and obviously with no impact at all because it's temporary. Typically each section has about 6 legs, and it has each one of the legs has a foot plates that will be removed. Seasonal summer thing, applicant Mr. Cowie just purchased property at 48 Franklin in April, and I got the invite to Spirit to come and speak on his behalf. That's something that Kristen or the balance commission wanted to discuss. But I did submit the application, and it's up to, I guess at this point, he has his hands maybe tomorrow or so. So if you wanted to sign, you could, and that might help us. Otherwise, I think we're still going to be subjected to 25 because Teresa Walker from the LRAC passed along the application information to those guys, to Bill and to some of the other members of the LRC there. Straightforward, like any other lake or river seasonal dock, it will be pulled in accordance with guidelines. There's a sand bottom there in that section. Reestablished the high ordinary high water mark. And I hope that Kristen has the packet right there. She might not at all. I have I can share a screen.
I did share the package with them, so they've all
good. I was hoping you did. I just sent you an email, Chris, and I'm like, I don't know if you can hear me, I don't know if you see me, but yeah, just disregard that email. We'll get it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, sorry about that. We did get it this afternoon. I took a quick look at it, didn't really look at it. It seemed like there was one issue regarding, is this applicable to rivers or not, with the current in the river, does the wetland, but that's really not up to us, I don't believe.
If you had, like I said, the comments, any comments, we would ask in DS. The flow there's a dock directly upgraded, or upstream, sorry, and as we know, there's several temporary or otherwise permanent docks along that stretch. The flow, I mean, right now the flow is astronomical, but I think it's going to be floats parallel to the flow, such that nothing will be impounded, but directed around. There is some aquatic vegetation in that area, not necessarily in the area you do it, but it's nothing that wouldn't be rebounded. It wouldn't rebound Sagittarius or Arrowhead, and also wild celery, which is the most common plants that are scattered all throughout that area. It's pretty hard bottom. Obviously, when the dam went down, things sort of stabilized and became more linear. There's a shoreline, the shoreline of that area is sloping, but not incredibly sloping such that anything would be erosive. Client is committed to not having, obviously, we have no recontouring of the shoreline, we have no regrading requirements, no reconfiguration. And then there's the temporary minimum steps that will be, obviously be installed such that things can move around, such that we don't have to have any disturbance. No, the vehicular machinery will be required to install the docking. It's obviously by technicians in waivers, stuff like that. It's a nice day to not, but that's the idea. Low impact. Seasonally, he wants to have some kayaks launched and he wants to fish. I mean, I've never been in that area. I went to reestablish the ordinary high water and the bass. Not having to go on the bass I couldn't see any of the sounds of some splash that are enormous. So, new homeowner,
Okay.
perfect opportunity for the abutting properties have them. Across the way is PEA, I'm sure they've got probably a complex about some point upstream or downstream.
Sergio, one of the pictures that was put out in the handout shows there are two rocks, it looks like, out in the middle of the river. Does this, which would impede people going down, does this dock further impede them? Can they still get through that?
I did mention that to David, and the applicant has a family member that does this kind of work in Newburyport, so we would make sure that we would avoid, obviously, you don't want to put any of the legs or any of the footsteps on those docks, on those rocks, excuse me. If there's one further out and then there's one a little closer that we completely avoid. The general area is between a shrub and an area that has typically the most level slope, obviously to avoid any of those impacts and any action that might promote erosion.
Any other comments?
If the applicant had to shrink any size based on any conflict with that rock, I think that wouldn't be an issue. He's not looking to put a yacht there, some kayaks, and to be able to fish a little bit.
If anyone wants to see this.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at it.
Do we have to approve?
I can stare at my phone. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about the stairs? I'm not clear how this is no impact. I see maybe minimal impact, but if there's a structure on the shoreline.
Because the stairs are temporary, it'll be. If you look at any of these companies that put this kind of stuff out, they can build custom or they can give you undulating aluminum steps. Or another alternative would be it might just require an aluminum ramp to the dock.
But so there will be, for some time of the year, a structure placed on the sloping shoreline down to the water, right?
That, or more importantly, I think it would be anchored to the top at the grass, anchored in the sense that maybe driven by stakes into the ground and might span entirely. If the contractor or manufacturer figures that's the easiest way to go, we might not in any scenario have any contact with that shoreline. But it's temporary in nature, so comes out. I'm not sure the timeline for DES mandates in PBN. We'll figure that out when we get the permit.
But we could at least presume it would shade even if it's not having direct contact, it would shade what's underneath it? Would it be so high?
It might shade, but as you know, they're all slatted, and that area is primarily forbs and grass. I think we had some asters and we had some, some asters, some violets, and yellow dock, curly dock. Nothing that would be permanently, I don't think that would be permanently damaged, so to speak, that they would never come back. Those were pretty opportunistic grasses and forbs.
So it's all within the floodway, it looks like? Or is that the old floodway with the dam? Or is it a revised floodway post-dam?
Revised, obviously that whole area was revised with a loma, and there's a note to that effect, number 4. So yeah, you're in there, but we're not. It's not like we're not proposing any permanent impact to flood storage, so to speak.
And so today, our purview is not necessarily even to comment on the plan, but just whether we're waiving our right to comment on the plan, is that right?
Exactly, but I figured if I got an invitation, you guys had some questions, wanted to talk about it, so I assume that Bill and Don would have some reservations. I mean,
yeah.
So I don't necessarily think I'm gonna in any way get this permitted. After their 5-day administrative review and then 10-day, it's gonna get kicked to 25. But nonetheless, David thought it would be advantageous of me to represent him and tell you guys what we want to do.
Sure.
So my thought is if you do have comments or concerns, share it and we could forward those on to the state if you want. I'm not sure where you were going with.
No, I guess I'm just trying to figure out our purview because, I have a full-time job and then I have kids and I fed them and then I had about 15 minutes to look at the plan before I raced here.
Yeah.
So I don't even feel like I'm in a position to make a ton of comments because I just haven't spent enough time with it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and this came up there's a 10-day window where we could say, okay, and that doesn't mean we happened to get this today and we had a meeting tonight, but had the timing been different? I guess Connor.
Timing was awkward because I wasn't quite sure when the meeting was. Also, at the same time, we had had a surveyor out there and just came into the point of last week. I said, all right, I'm going to get this file Monday. And obviously we don't have sections 12 and 13 checked off. And David understands that he will probably be kicked into a 25-day review. And subject, obviously the DES is going to look for any comments from you and the LRS.
But I guess my point, this actually is like the best possible timing because you got it in right before a meeting, so we actually could determine it, even though we could make a determination. But Connor, you were saying that.
I have to admit, I didn't know that was the timing.
Yeah, no, and it's not but sometimes these get reviewed just by the chairs. I mean, these typically aren't a big deal. But in this situation, I'm not entirely supportive of this. I don't want to say we are. I don't see the need for us to really comment at this point.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I'm not for it. That's sort of my stance at this point.
I don't have an opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean.
Right.
So Connor, explain, or maybe Sergio explain, if the commission doesn't comment, it will be approved without commission comment.
Before our next meeting.
Not necessarily.
This is our only opportunity to comment.
Unless you comment.
Or if DES comes back.
Or if DES comes back, right, exactly.
Okay, I was not clear on that at all. I see. I thought we had another opportunity.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I see.
They changed
The opportunity is to waive the right or discuss it now or write comments to that.
Got it. Okay, I see. Yep.
Yeah.
I can say I don't have any comments, but I don't really want to waive sign for the 10-day.
Right. We're not going to sign for the 10-day. I don't have any. I mean, there's a number of rules regarding this sort of thing, and if they meet the state rules, I'm not sure what else.
Yeah, I guess. Sorry.
We have for.
I'm sorry.
So. It's fine.
entirely sure what year the rewrite was for asking commissions to waive. It probably came aboard on, or arise with some contentious projects, I'm not sure. But now the PDN application, which is essentially, it's not quite a PDN because it does give the commissions and LRSD an opportunity to intervene. So that's where we are here. And I'm sure that they will look at any review and entertain any comments from you or from the LRS as noted. But we had assumed and that you'd be probably taking more 25-day review.
Okay, Allison, do you have?
I'm so sorry.
No, go.
They come in and I gotta get them out. Yeah, my thinking is, Sergio, what have you all looked at different flood scenarios? So for instance, we know, modeling suggests that, with the high sea level rise scenario and say a 100-year storm, and this property is in the 100-year floodplain, that, tidal inundation is going to come up above the Great Bridge, is that what we call that? Mm-hmm. The Great Bridge, right? So we know the dynamics of this, that could become bi-directional. I mean, probably not in the lifetime of this dock, I guess. But what I'm thinking about is, the erratic precipitation, the more frequent, bigger storms. I guess, how has climate and different, larger flooding scenarios like we're seeing right now with the incredible rapids out there, how has that been factored into the design?
But it's obvious got flow, so it will rise with any flood storm events on its legs that are on the foot plates. I think it's not. I mean, it's not close. It's not subject to the coastal vulnerability assessment for DES. I discussed that, that otherwise it's like any other tidal dock. It will adjust on its legs to any rise in water elevation or water level.
So the legs extend above the base. The legs extend above the dock, and it's an open hole and moves up and down, because that's very different from the docks that I've seen along there. Is that?
Are you permanent docks? You think? You're thinking more?
No, even the seasonal docks, they're just on a foot plate, and it's a solid aluminum top, and sometimes they overtop when water levels are higher. So this is designed for increased flows. Is that what you're saying?
Again, I don't like to dictate those means and methods, but the idea was that we'd probably have some flows. If you wanted it, if you wanted to see something that was more fixed.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You don't. It doesn't sound like you want it fixed.
No, but it also sounds like you don't have the design of the dock yet. Is that correct?
Well, that's why it's the permitting and it's the configuration where we were more concerned with the PBN. I mean, with the PBN application. Yeah. We've got a 6x20 design. We've got a general location of what we want for where the stairs or a flexible ramp would be.
Now I'm confused. Is the dock fixed to the supports? I know the aluminum support, they have those feet on the bottom, and now is the dock then screwed or tightened at a particular point on the supports?
It has to be leveled to some degree. It's adjustable.
But is it fixed on those, or does it just collar those supports and move up and down?
It has to. I'm not a dock expert. I can only assume that it's got to be anchored to some degree. God forbid, a midsummer storm came through.
Is the dock floatable?
Yeah.
Does the dock float?
I hope so.
On the
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the idea that the applicant is thinking.
Well, that's a different thing that I,
So our comments go to DES?
Yes.
So perhaps we just keep our comments general and voice concerns with, a lack of clarity of the actual design. And we recommend designing it to accommodate increases in flood flow and volume associated with changing climate.
And I think the anchoring points of how the dock is anchored, when there's increased flow like there is today, if the bank is already inundated with water, however this anchored, is it going to be sufficient or? I think that's my main concern, is that as the surrounding. Could it rip out? Yeah.
And that actually was the origin of my question related to larger volumes of water, was not so much, well, it led to a good line of inquiry, but was more about the attachment point. And then, if there is aquatic vegetation, I think we'd like a mind toward that, whether it be like monitoring that there is no impact as was stated, or, and then some, I don't know, just mitigation if it's not. I don't know what that looks like, but just keeping in mind the presence of aquatic vegetation and then any impacts to shoreline vegetation. Those are the things that emerge for me.
Good. Well, and that's part of what DES is going to do anyways, correct?
Thanks, Tom.
Let's hope.
So
Yeah, and this
you're just asking them to
specific.
do their job.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. So we can send a memo. Do we need a motion to do that? No. Yeah. All right, so I'll motion that we send a memo to DES as described by Allison just now.
I'll second it.
Verbatim.
It's going to be confusing, but.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I'll say aye, because I didn't initially. So that passed unanimously. That we will send a comment letter. We are not signing it. Thank you, Sergio, for your time and hanging on this long.
All right, recognize this.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So we have a Skywatch event at Rains Farm in October.
Yep, so I reached out kind of with an hope to repeat the event that we had to cancel last year. And they had availability on October 2nd at 7:30 with October 16th as a cloud date. I jumped at it just because I hoped that we could do it, but I can't pull it off on my own. I know Nick said that he would help, but we would appreciate assistance to pull the event off, probably with parking assistance and maybe set up in the barn. But the idea is just invite people out into the field. There'll be telescopes available. They'll talk about what stars you can see based on that night and talk through what the view is.
Would we have a limit to that
That's a good question.
and a sign up to it?
Yeah, we can set it up anyway. Maybe we pay attention as things could change as we head toward fall. I don't know. I don't want to say that out loud and curse it, but I think that if the commission is comfortable, we could have a sign up limit. I don't know what your comfort level for that would be, but we could decide that maybe at the ideally August Conservation Commission meeting. And then we could do like a Eventbrite ticket, free ticket. Does that
I'd be
sound
happy
good?
to help with that.
What's that?
I'd be happy to help with that.
Thank you. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I might be able to help. I would just say, that's the next meeting. I mean, could we just decide to have an Eventbrite thing and just move forward with it rather
Sure.
than bring it up again?
What number?
Now you're really cornering me. 30.
That's what I was thinking 30 also.
Okay.
How many experts are there?
There's one speaker.
One.
But a lot of times it's put on by the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. And so a bunch of people tend to bring telescopes to it, so you have all these high-tech telescopes available to you.
And
So-
people will be like coming in and out.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So,
And I think we can go higher than 30.
What's the parking capacity?
That's.
So, I mean, it's rains, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying, my goal is to have the pathway out to the barn mowed. It was supposed to be this week. Again, it was pushed back to the beginning of this week, but it's been raining, so I don't know. But we can park a fair number of
Yeah, we can
vehicles
get
all
that.
the way up to the barn, head in along the stone wall. So, I don't think that we're limited to 30 based on parking. I think we could go higher than that.
no, let's be ambitious
With
here. It
some-
rains. We want to have events and people and,
Yeah, I think the hillside would, is enough space to get enough good spots
If
for
the
telescopes.
conditions are, yeah. I'll let them decide what's better, yeah.
yeah, we'll figure out parking.
Okay.
30's
We always kind of kvetch about parking at rains, and I think we just need to just move forward with that.
Okay. So are we higher or lower? 30 or
Higher.
high?
50?
I was thinking 50.
50.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I think that's an awful lot of people to have out with telescopes and then.
That's great.
There might only be 10 telescopes, so it's not like 50 telescopes.
Little clusters of people.
Yeah,
Yeah, they come and go.
We don't have.
We won't get them.
Hot
They'll-
chocolate in the barn.
it's unlikely if,
Kristen and Drew and
Bring hot
Nick.
chocolate, apparently. Is that my goal? Okay.
I don't know. We'll work it out.
we can get Ben Anderson will help deal with parking and all
Great.
this stuff.
I can
Right?
help in some capacity on
Oh,
that.
great.
I'm free that weekend,
Awesome.
3 months out.
All right. Minutes. I had no comments. Does anyone have any edits?
I thought they were good. I'd move they be adopted.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I'll abstain.
Oh, okay. With one abstention, they pass 6-0. So much quicker. Other business. We still need a few members. If anyone knows of anyone, we might advertise.
I'll check with Toby.
So that would be great if anyone could recruit someone to join our fun commission here. Otherwise, I think do we have anything else?
No?
No? Okay. All right. Our next meeting, Kristen's not stopping me from ending the meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 10th of August. And submission deadline, July 30th. With that, I move to adjourn. All in favor? Oh, seconded? All in favor?
Any second.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.